Whereas my rich dad was my best friend's father. And when I was 10 years old, I wanted to find out how to make money. So it was my poor dad who suggested I go study with rich dad. He says, you want to look for the best teacher. So I said, why is rich dad a better teacher than you? He says, because rich dad is an entrepreneur. And I said, so I'm 10 years old. I said, what are you then? He says, my dad says, I'm an employee. And I didn't know the differences. When you're 10 years old, you just kind of looking for your own answers. But as you know, there's a big difference between an employee and an entrepreneur. You know, the values are very, very different.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. It's my great pleasure to be with Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a great friend, and someone who has had a huge impact on millions of people around the world. I have talked to people who have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It has changed their life. They have looked at financial matters in a whole new way. And Robert, that is one of your greatest legacies, and right at the top, I want to thank you for that, because so many people have benefited from your books and your teaching. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. It's humbling. It's humbling, and people come up and say, my father gave me the book, or you changed my life, and it's humbling, you know.
Well, and we've traveled the world together, and the other day I was saying we were in this little village in remote Bolivia. And this girl comes out of her house, she's carrying Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Pobre Rico, Pobre Rico, whatever. And, you know, here she is in this small village in Bolivia. She's reading your book and just gives you this big hug. It was just such a moving moment. And you have had this influence all over the world. So thank you for being here today. And Robert, one of the things that you talk about is financial education. And now more than ever, I think people need to be financially educated, kids and adults. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think all we have to do is look at our present situation. My question is, why is homelessness accelerating? Do you know what I mean? I think it was Jefferson, one of the earlier founding fathers, who were against the central bank or the Fed. They were against it. And I think it was Jefferson, it could be wrong, he said, if we have a central bank, the children will wake up homeless in the land their fathers founded. And so when I see this explosion of homelessness, then, you know, it all correlates. It makes sense to me. But personally, because in 1964, I was coming out of high school, and then in 65, I was looking at my quarters, you know, my little $50 here, like stuff like this, and they were no longer silver. It was now, you turn it to the side, it was now copper. And that violates Gresham's law. And Gresham's law says when bad money enters a system, good money goes into hiding. Another way of saying that is I say this here, I hold this up here. Here's 50 cents, and here's $5. Which one do you want? And most people go for this when this is worth 2 of these.
Right, the silver content is worth much more than that piece of paper.
Correct. And then in 20 years, how much will this be worth and how much will this be worth? So there's no inflation. It's what's happening is the value of the dollar is going down. So that's what makes things more expensive.
And this has happened in great societies and empires around the world. The Romans had to cut their currency, and that was a sign that they were declining. And you know, we see that throughout history. But for people to be financially savvy, for them to understand that the system is telling you one thing, but what's happening in the real world is quite another. You know, reading your book, playing your games, all this is important because they're not going to teach this in the schools, right, Robert?
No, and that's why I created the board game. Was that 96? I think it came out, and 97 I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But we create the board game so people could teach people capitalism. And so we bypassed the school system. And just, you're talking about how remote, I was just out in the South Pacific. I went to visit the battle sites where the Marines fought, like Iwo Jima, and Palau, Peleliu, Okinawa. And there's this little island out there. Only 33 people live there, Garrett. This little island, 33 people. Big island, but 33 people. And this woman comes out, she has my cash flow board game. She says, I'm teaching my island. I'm teaching my islander friends.
That is
People
great,
teach
Robert.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so interesting that you developed the board game, and then you wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad as kind of an explanation for the board game.
Correct.
And your explanation for the game became a worldwide bestseller. It's
Yes,
funny how things.
interesting.
I really want to make a documentary on this because the story of how this came about is just incredible.
Right. Thank you.
But the importance of games, you have talked about this, others have. The best way to learn is through the games. And who was it that you've taught us about that says that games are the second best thing to doing the real thing?
Right. You look at the game of chess, right? That was to teach military strategy, how to think militarily. And when I was a kid, my rich dad was my best friend's father. He would teach me playing Monopoly, 4 greenhouses, 1031 tax deferred exchange into a red hotel. And that's how I learned. And the reason games are important, like you and I both played rugby, we can't learn rugby reading a book. And you can't learn to play golf reading a book or listen to a lecture. So games are powerful educators because it involves the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And the reason it's spiritual is when you fall down, when you fail, you gotta stand back up. And I think that's what a lot of people don't have. I think that's why they go homeless. They can't stand up anymore.
Right.
You know.
Right. Now, on the games, so my kids, you have cash flow for kids as well as for adults. And I've used cash flow for kids to help teach my kids about money. Now, of course, they're not going to have money and they're not going to buy hotels or anything else, but through the game, they can learn how to do that. So these games are so important. And it's interesting, Robert, I know you love Roman history. I love Roman history. The Romans taught the students through games. In fact, it was called ludus, and ludus means game and school. So the Romans taught their students through the playing of games. And your game, Cash Flow for Kids, is such a great way for parents to teach their kids about money. You don't have to give the kids the money, you just teach them through the game. And I've had so many people, Robert, that have bought the game, taught their kids about money, and here we are 20 years later, and their kids are doing okay because they learned about money. They learned about what a credit card and interest and a bank account. They learned all about that through the game. And so how many years has the Cash Flow for Kids game been out there?
Gee, I don't know, 20, 25 now. And it just keeps growing because people can teach people. It's an interesting thing, Garrett, though, when Kim and I came out with the cash flow board game, we hired a guy from Hasbro to a consultant, how do we market this now? And he said to me something interesting. He said, the problem is in the 20th century, people are not smart enough to handle Monopoly anymore. And he says people have gotten so dumbed down that they can't play Monopoly. And he says, your game is, too complex, because as you know, this is the real game board. It's called a financial statement. And so Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the game teaches fundamentals of accounting, the most boring subject possible on planet Earth. So anyway, and people have fun learning then once they get into the game. And again, I said why Kim and I brought it out was for people to teach people, bypass the system that won't teach it.
Right, and by learning the game, it's the next best thing to actually doing it.
Correct.
And so people take these lessons, and in your game, you play various roles. I mean, I've played the game many times. I'm a carpenter, I'm an engineer, and you learn through that as well.
Right.
playing a role within the game. And so
Right.
it's a very powerful teaching method. You know, my son has a book called Greenback's Book of Law, and it's a way for kids to learn about the law. But to cement that information, he has a
Right.
card game that helps the kids
Right.
understand the legal principles through playing a game. Games are the best way to go. Now, Robert, for kids in the future, you know, we have AI coming, we have a lot of job losses coming. What do you recommend for someone who maybe is watching this and they're in junior high or high school? You know, what would you say to someone where there's so much uncertainty for the future?
Well, as we talk about, you and I love the game of rugby, but it's not a game for everybody, as you know.
Right.
And you know, the most popular sport, I think, is soccer. And I went out for soccer. I didn't like the game because you can't hit people. So that's my way of introducing. You got to find the game that interests you. So I went out for soccer, and then, what do you mean I can't hit that son of a bitch, you know?
Well, you have
So
to
in
learn to fall
rugby,
down, pretend like you were hit.
yeah, I mean, those phonies. But anyway, so you got to find the game you like. And you know, as you know, I love real estate. And the reason I like real estate is very simply because I can use debt as money. Because in 1971, this became debt. You know, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, August 15th, 1971. And then inflation took off. And inflation isn't prices going up. Inflation is the purchasing power of this going down.
I hear what you're saying. If you find out what you like, real estate is what you like.
I love it.
And you made an effort to invest in real estate, to learn about it, to surround yourself with good people who know it. I love the fact that you always say that you don't want to be the smartest guy in the room.
No.
Right? You want to have the smart people surrounding you.
Correct.
And in real estate, you've surrounded yourself with smart people. But for someone starting out who is, you know, thinking maybe I should understand real estate, maybe I should understand the stock market, that's a good angle to go for, because you're going to have to benefit from one of those activities during your lifetime, especially with all the job losses that are coming.
Correct, absolutely. And then you look at this here, you know, this is the Zimbabwe dollar. And I think we're going, you know, this is going the same way. This is 10 million Zim dollars. And you can't do anything with this. So this is going down in value, and our school system still teaches you, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt. You know, I do exactly the opposite. And the thing that upsets me, as you know, Garrett, is that when they indoctrinate kids into invest in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and then they tell you bonds are safe. And as you and I know right now, our bond market is crashing. And the bond market is 10 times bigger than the stock market. So I think we're heading for a depression right now. And when the bonds crash, our banking system crashes. So that, you know, so that's why you and I studied the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It can only cover 1.2% of all deposits. So we're going the way of Cyprus and the Weimar Republic right now, which brought Hitler to power. You know, when the German economy collapsed under Hitler, because they printed trillions of dollars, of marks, the German government collapsed and Hitler came up. We're on the verge of that right now. That's what frightens me.
Well, and Robert, I love your sense of history, because, you know, history does repeat. Maybe it doesn't repeat exactly, but it certainly rhymes. You know, things happen again and again. And, you know, the fact that people have printed money in the past without a good result is a sign for all of us. And if you don't get educated, if you believe in what they're telling you about the security of our banks and our system, you may be caught totally unawares, and you may find yourself homeless. So, you know, studying and understanding the system like you advocate is extremely important. And I encourage all my clients to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You know, it is just, it's such an easy way
Yeah.
to understand the system. And Robert, if you could just briefly explain the difference between your rich dad and your poor dad. That for me is just a key in all of this.
Well, my my poor dad, as I've told it many times, was a PhD from Stanford and Northwestern. Very smart guy. You know, he finished his bachelor's degree in 2 years, and then when he graduated, he was the youngest principal of a school. You know, because he was a young kid yet. He's the principal of the school. So when I was born, I was too young to remember this, but my father was a principal of this little school on the North Shore of Hawaii. And then he rose really rapidly in the ranks. For Japanese, he was tall, 6'4", very commanding speaker, very educated, and he would teach at the University of Hawaii, as well as be a superintendent of education. And then he made the tragic mistake of running for lieutenant governor as a Republican.
Not in Hawaii.
The People's Republic of Hawaii.
Right.
And he lost everything. He lost his job, everything. Because the governor, you know, politics is the dirtiest game there is. And the governor said to my dad, because the governor brought my father up. And so my father ran against him as lieutenant governor, as a Republican against a Democrat. My father couldn't find a job anymore. He blacklisted my father. And that's when my poor dad became poor. And meanwhile, I'm in the Marine Corps flying, you know, getting ready to go to Vietnam as a pilot. And I go, holy mackerel, you know. Whereas my rich dad was my best friend's father. And when I was 10 years old, I wanted to find out how to make money. So it was my poor dad who suggested I go study with rich dad. He says, you want to look for the best teacher. So I said, why is rich dad a better teacher than you? He says, because rich dad is an entrepreneur. And I said, so I'm 10 years old. I said, what are you then? He says, my dad says, I'm an employee. And I didn't know the differences. So when you're 10 years old, you're just kind of looking for your own answers. But as you know, there's a big difference between an employee and an entrepreneur. You know, the values are very, very different. So you look at the richest guys in the world today, most of them dropped out of school. Like, you know, what's his name? Steve Jobs dropped out of Reed College.
Bill Gates.
Yeah, Gates. Michael Dell, and I don't know if Musk finished school or not, but he's a pretty smart dude. But the point here is this: without financial education, homelessness grows in our country. That's tragic. All over the world, they see it, you know. In South America, they're called favelas, you know, the homeless people. And I'm concerned we're going to go to civil unrest in not too long, because we can't just keep printing money. So that's my concern.
Yep. Well, and it's time for people to get educated, and you know, certainly you have provided a great deal of content for that effort. Robert, you know, what do you think your legacy is? I mean, I've been around you for 20 plus years. I know what your legacy is, but in your words, what is your legacy?
Well, I don't know what, you know, I was saying to you, the biggest thing that touches my heart is when a young person, boy or girl, generally they're boys, so they come up to my dad gave me your book. You know, and that's what I want, is they hand it down. So what other compliment could you have? It goes from father or son or father to daughter, and we teach each other, and we take care of each other.
Right.
And you know, Maria Montessori is one of the greatest educators there ever was, Montessori school system. And she says, what the hand does, the mind remembers. So that's when you're playing cash flow, and you actually have to fill out one of these financial statements, you know, income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, and your hands are doing it. So your hand is connected to your brain. And I think that's the best way to learn. It's like when you learn to play golf. You don't take a driver onto the putting green. But that's how we learn.
Yeah, right. Well, I just want to thank you again, Robert, for coming on with us. And your legacy is solid. I mean, as I've seen traveling around the world with you, you have affected so many people in so many countries. And you know, with Rich Dad Poor Dad and the games that you've created, it's just really rewarding to see how your message has been spread throughout the world. So thank you very much for that, Robert. We really appreciate you coming on today.
And that's how we win. It's people teaching people.
Right.
Bypass the school system. It's So thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.